Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. 9:30 here for a start time. And we got the one item on the agenda, 2.1, 2025. Was told we're going to work on the capital budget for today. So with that, whenever you're ready, sir.
And Mr. Reeve, I've got Rod patched in. I believe he has some opening comments, and then we'll be turning it over to Denisha. And today, yes, is correct. The focus is capital.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Excellent. All right, so today is the start of a new era for council, a budget that reflects a multitude of discussions that we have had with you as council through the last 6 months. So we have not tried to guess your priorities or move you in any direction or another in this budget. It includes increases in protecting your assets, whether that be roads, bridges, culverts, or your most valuable asset, your staff. Today, we provide a brief overview of the entire budget, which you'll see, but the focus will be on capital. Throughout the next 3 to 4 meetings, we would ask council to be considering 2 major factors in balancing the budget. How much can we increase the tax revenue, and what level of service will that provide? Ask questions today and the next few days, and someone in the room will either answer you or do the research and get an answer before the next meeting. So with that, I better stop or I'll wreck Denisha's presentation. Are there any questions before we get started?
No, I think we're good to just get into the presentation here and see where we're
Super, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, members of council. So today we are presenting before council the capital budget with a summary of the operational budget. To highlight, we have included in the budget property tax revenue of $31.6 million, which is 1.4% higher than last year's budget and approximately 95% over the 2024 actuals. The assessment information for 2025 is still pending, so we'll have more information on that as we get the updates from the assessor, which we're anticipating will be in the new year. There were increases in expenses of approximately $2.5 million compared to last year's budget, and the majority of that is in the new initiatives, and we will have the detail on the new initiatives in our next budget meeting also. So the main part of what we're talking about here today, capital, in total, we have $19.7 million in capital spread over our infrastructure, our airport, and a small percentage for improvement to our admin building in order to develop additional office spaces. And those fundings, those projects will be funded by our capital reserve, our operating budget this year, and some use of money in the bank, the cash that is unallocated to any particular capital project. And we also will be getting some external funding from government grants. The $5.1 million mentioned here is coming from STIP LGFF and the CCBF funding. And last year we had the 2 projects that we had approved under debenture, and so those funds will also be available. We also highlighted on page 4 some of the factors impacting the capital operating budget this year, and we will go into more detail with those in our operating budget presentation. For now, we have some highlights there in the package on screen. So going on to our main focus this morning, which is a capital budget. As I shared, we have 3 major areas that are have the capital projects, which is our transportation and infrastructure is accounting for $12.8 million. infrastructure was for $4.8 million. We have our airport operations, which is $5.1 million. And our protective services is approximately $1 million. Recreation is $9,500. And we have our solid waste, $218,000, and our waste, our water supply and distribution, $285,000. And so in light of not having everyone in the room for a lengthy amount of time, we're going to have our fire section go first, and then infrastructure, since it's a larger part of the conversation, will go next. If there are no questions right now, we will proceed.
Good morning, Council. For the items presented to you regarding the protective services, I will highlight on pages 8 of your document there in front of you. Septic field at Station 4. This project here is coming in at around $35,000. That project there, we did get several quotes for this year. There was funds from last year, but it was not enough to cover that project. The field itself freezes. It doesn't work in the winter. Again, it's not to code. When the building and everything was put in back when it was, and now the code is different. So it needs to be redone. County sprinkler protection unit equipment. The county feels that it's very important to have this equipment for our residents for wildfires. We go through, when we had the wildfires happen here in 2023 to the south, we did set up SPU equipment utilizing members' equipment. So we took fire members' equipment off their personal homes and put it on other structures within the county to protect our residents. And we did not have equipment at that time. So we feel that's vitally important to have the right equipment to protect our residents. SCBA filling station. This one here, I believe, was a filling station prior to me starting. That was decided on by council to rent. From what I'm told, that was the avenue that the council wanted to take on this. We only have one filling station in the county for 4 fire stations. Doing training, you can use air, but it's very difficult logistical wise to get those 22 bottles filled every week with one person going back and forth. The ideal thing here is we've paid almost $30,000 on that rental. Another 6 months, you must just buy the unit. That's why that is there. The filling station at Station 2 is that new. We would like to get a new filling station at Station 2. Station 3 and Station 2 are our most active stations. Just again, logistical wise, filling 22 bottles a week takes a lot of time for me back and forth to do this. So having a filling station, at Station 2 to do live fire training. Right, this year we're using a grant to do fire training, and within that grant there's a course for live fire, which includes a ton of air out of the bottles. And the filling station is a vital piece of equipment to do the correct and the right training. Just going through the list here. The water, those are through, I believe, another department, correct, Denisha? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on to page 9 of your documents. At the bottom of it there is pickup trucks. So right now, currently, we have half tons in some of these stations. They cannot haul and pull the larger trailers that they have with their side-by-sides on it. We do have a sprinkler protection unit trailer that we've set up with grant funds this year, putting donation funds into that from other industry. Those trucks that they have can't pull it. It's too heavy. So we are looking at upgrading to a bigger unit pickup truck for those types of units. The replacement of F111, that's the fire engine. That fire engine there is currently sitting in Station 4, which is at Selmo. The year of that truck is 2003, so it's 21, 22 years old, getting up there. We're putting Band-Aids on that truck right now currently. They don't make any more valves for it. They don't make any more systems, even the tank inside. You'd have to buy a brand new truck just to replace the tank. It's getting old, right? So looking at replacing that unit as per SOGs as well. We have a 20-year lifespan on trucks, and that's over that over that standard that we have for the county. Is there any questions on those items?
Well, start with Phil.
Yeah, through the chair to Sheldon. Refresh my memory about that engine. This isn't the first time we've talked about it, right?
Through the chair, Councillor, it's been brought up in the past. There was some talk about it, but that's where it stopped.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are there grant opportunities for that?
Through the chair, yes, there is. We're looking at some grants to see what there is out there.
But like with any other grant application, you're not assured.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I just have two questions. I'll get over to Bruce. One question on the trucks. Now, I understand if these ones aren't heavy enough that we're utilizing, do we need new trucks, or can we take a look at our fleet? Because we know that there are vehicles within our fleet that summer students are operating, like the diesel trucks that we just picked up, that they use for hauling a small trailer and a lawnmower back and forth that a half-ton could easily use instead of utilizing it. Instead of buying equipment, because we just replaced, 4 trucks this year or last year, can we look at right-sizing the fleet?
To the chair, I would like to redirect that answer question to Jeff.
Through the chair, we have looked at opportunities of using infrastructure trucks for Sheldon. He needs a 3/4 ton. We do not have another spare units that we can.
Well, I'm not talking about spare. I know we have some units in the fleet that will say some of the summer students utilize, and you see them driving around and they've got a couple hand tools, or they're moving a mower on a small trailer, and they're driving around on a heavier pickup truck when that could be used as a half-ton and put the heavier truck to the haul where it's needed. I'm just wondering, and that's just optically what I've seen through the summer. You're asking for vehicles because these ones don't meet the requirements or the just for what they're hauling and they're moving, but then we have vehicles that are way too big for what they're being utilized for.
Through the chair, I have to look into the specifics there. When Sheldon made his request, we did look around and didn't find any suitable units, but I have to get back to you.
Okay, and my second question is, looking at this, and this is going to be across all departments, but just kind of in general, we have a lot of these that they have dollar signs and everything attached to. We got just about $14 million in capital here for requests, and then all of these potential grant funding. I just want to make sure now, the county used to do this thing where we would budget and we would throw the grant request in as a budget line and budget around those numbers coming back as requests, but you don't always qualify for those grants. And we ended up having to find other funding and move things around. So I'm making sure that we're not overstating the funds that we have or the funds that are available, and we're not using, it's a potential grant versus what we actually have, because those potential grants doesn't mean that we are going to get them.
Right. So, through to the chair. So where on the source of funding it has potential grants, those have not been included in the budget as a revenue item, as money coming in. So we are working with Alberta Council, who has greater access to grant resources and knowledge of availability of funds out there. And so we have just recently started the conversation with them on potential grants to fund some of these programs. So they have gone through we met with the representative of what we're working with last week, and so he went through all our capital projects that we have on here and shared where he may be able to bundle things together and access certain grants. So we're not sure where we have potential grants, but this is where he's going to be working to see how much of these projects we can get funded. So when those funds come in, so let's say we're successful in getting 25% of the ones that here has potential grants, then that 25% will be funds that we get in. After budget is approved, it will be brought to council to share with council that that fund was received. It will go into the reserve, or if council wishes to use it in other funding. So the numbers that were shared on the funds coming from grants, those were for the grants that we know we are more likely to receive, like the STIP, this LGFF, and the Canada Building Fund. Those ones, we have the project to support those. Those other ones was just to give council information on that. We are working to see where we can get additional revenue sources to fund some of these projects, but we first have to at least allocate for them internally, and if those funds come in, it just means that we have additional funds in the bank.
Right, Councillor Brestage, and then Councillor Lowe.
Through the chair to Sheldon. On the fire engine, what is the lead time on a new engine? The last one was 2 years.
Through the chair to Councillor Preston, yeah, it's around 1.5 years right now with the manufacturer. Yeah, now, because I believe, and Denisha can correct me if I'm wrong, please, is we use Canoe for resourcing.
No,
Correct.
yeah, we'll.
So we have a better opportunity to have it quicker because of that.
Okay. Can we not spread the capital expense over 2 years if we're waiting 2 years to get a truck? Instead of taking it all out of 1 year and,
Again, I'm gonna redirect that to corporate services.
So, through the chair, to Councillor Bruce, it will all depend on the down payment that the manufacturer requires. So with council approving it and setting the funds aside, it doesn't necessarily mean that all of the money will be spent in the year. But we have to account for it, because if the truck were to be delivered 100% next year, we have to have the funds available in order to purchase it. If it goes to 1.5 years, depending on how the payment terms is, the funds will be split over multiple years. So this is one of our first time buying such a large unit like this. We know for some of the larger equipments that we purchased for Jeff, some occurred within the year of the budget, some went into the next budget season. So it all depends on the delivery. Yeah. It doesn't mean that the funds will leave our bank if it's not delivered, but it's just
but what
available.
happens if it's part of this year's budget,
Right.
which we could use part of those funds for something else that we need this year?
Through the chair to Councillor Booth, yes, that is true. So it becomes to whether or not council wants to fund it, the purchase for a potential 100% in 2025, or whether council wants to split that. If council wishes to split that, then we will looking to purchase it probably later in the year, possibly, so that if there is a down payment that is required, and we know that the delivery won't be happening until 2026, and so that we can split the funds that way. If council wishes to make the truck available for the 2025 year, then we would be going out and looking to purchase it earlier in the year after budget approval, and with the potential of the delivery. So it all depends how council wishes to fund the purchase. So we can go out to market at different times.
If Sheldon wanted to add something.
Yeah, so, thank you, Chair. The last truck that we received for Station 2, there was some small little hiccups regarding the paint on the truck. So typically in the factory line, I was down there and I talked to the guys. And your truck gets a sequence number, and it's in the factory line. and then all of a sudden, let's just say, there's a paint chip, then that truck has to be pulled out of the factory line and it loses its place in that line. It goes to the very back again, right? So that also plays factors in. Yeah, you might get the truck in September, but now because of these little issues that we have to fix, now it's pushed to December, right? So it's very tricky to say we're gonna get it now. It all comes down to a lot of other factors.
Counselor Wilhelm, and then I think Rod's got his hand up there.
Through the chair to administration. So, yeah, I mean, this is going to go for all the budget discussions, but we'll start with Sheldon's area. So, a lot of these capital asks, I'd ask as we continue these conversations, if you could essentially tier some of the asks, like things that are like, these are absolute needs, these are things that we can get by. So, and then to follow that up, we've got two line items here. One's replace a 160 pickup, and that's not underneath fire and protective services. But I'm just wondering, we've got these three: replace a 150, 213, and 126. If we were to replace, say, a 150, could that truck take over for a 160? Is it possible to? So then we don't need to replace a 160. We can just shift the one from fire protective services over to infrastructure for that need, or even, I know there's some line items for additional pickups for potentially additional staff that's going to come on. Can any of these trucks be utilized for that instead, thus eliminating some line items here? And then last part of that long question I have, Sheldon, is under budgeting, because this 2025 budget is very dramatic. Or not dramatic, it's very large. It's a large ask. So can we, as we look to replace those smaller trucks in your fleet with bigger ones that can actually pull the trailers, can we look at spreading that over maybe 3 years, right? Replace one a year just to spread these costs out, because it's a significant cost or infrastructure budget increase we're looking for in 2025. So we're gonna have to find ways to take your asks and spread them out a little bit more to make it palatable for our budget.
Through the chair to Councillor, to answer your first question, I'm gonna redirect that to Jeff, again, he would know better on the Alpha 160 unit.
Yeah.
On your second question, the answer would be yes. There's always options, right, to look at that, depending on what can come down from infrastructure department. If there's trucks that we can pass down the line, instead of going and purchasing something brand new, is there options to use a truck that we already have in the fleet that's going to be replaced? It's big enough to pull a trailer. It can now come down to fire services.
And I can see like your septic field, in my opinion, that's got to be fixed sooner rather than later. It's just going to cause more problems. And it looks like your SCBA filling stations they have almost 100% return on investment. Why are we renting them when we could just do a one-time capital purchase and use it for however 10, 15 years, right? So those ones make the most sense. I'm just looking, if I'm looking on the truck side or the equipment side, I think we need to spread some of these costs out, especially if we need to get that fire engine sooner rather than later, and then see if we can shift some stuff around to replace these other line items in our capital budget.
And online there's Rod.
Thank you. Through the chair to council, just to follow up back on the grants, I wanted to point that when Denise and I talked, so when you look, 5.277 million is coming from cash, is what Denisha said on, I think, slide 2 or whatever. That's the money that we said if we don't get grants, we're using the extra cash. If we do get grants, the amount of extra cash we have to use reduces. And the same on the capital side. If you consider that of the 18 million, 5.2 is coming from cash, if you want to reduce the amount you're taking out of cash, you have to reduce this list. But in doing so, you're not changing the overall net budget because you're reducing the revenue from cash and you're reducing the expense on the capital. So just to consider those things, unless you want to keep the 5.277 cash coming in and just reduce the capital, then you'll be better. Then you'll be fine after that.
Okay, I got 2 more questions. One, and this will be to Denisha, again, around the whole funding model. The 1.93 transfer from capital reserves, is that taking out of what we have in reserves? I'm assuming that we're going to be lowering our reserves to fund these?
It's a combination of, I think, coming out of pure reserve would be the two for the utilities and environment, the 285 and the 218 for water supply distribution and the solid waste. What that also includes are the budgeted amounts for 2024 for the projects that were not complete that we will put in and take out. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the reserve that we had at the beginning of the year will be 100% drawn down over and above what council approved for the 2024 budget. So all the projects that council had approved for infrastructure to postpone until 2024, those, it's basically those, the majority of those projects that are coming out. So it's not, the only additional withdrawal from reserves, if I'm recalling correctly, it's the 285 for water and the 218 for the solid waste.
Yeah, my next one, and this is for Sheldon, just your comment about having the two stations, that currently you're running back and forth filling these, and just kind of time-wise, it makes it difficult to do, or in between. If we had two filling stations, is there somebody qualified in one of these other halls to be able to fill it, or is that a request for somebody else?
To the chair, no, there are people that are qualified. It's the time of day, right? Just because it's running back and forth, then we pay our members to run back and forth on mileage, and fees to them to do that, correct? So it just comes down to the time of day. You know, if there's 20 bottles that are out of service because there's no air and there's a structure fire that happens up in Fort Assiniboine, I'm rushing to get bottles from somewhere else to get up there right now. So it's a time thing.
Well, thanks for the clarification on that. Councilor Burrows?
Oh, yeah. So on the filling stations, I just wanna check too, are there certifications that go along with those filling stations annually to make sure there's no oil coming into the air or something along with, is there I mean, you don't just buy a piece of equipment and then have zero operating cost to it. So what are we in for over a 10-year period of owning and operating a filling station?
Yep, to the chair, to Councilor Burrows. They do it annually. We just had one completed at the filling station in Blue Ridge. It was around $500 to get it completed, oil service, the time, all that goes on with that, the filters. And it's from a third party. It's not, we don't do it. You know, a contractor, they have that. They come in, they're certified, they give a certificate. It's on the filling station for a year, right? So it is there. To have a 10-year, I'd have to get some numbers for you.
And how, sorry, just to follow up, so how long do these stations last? Depends on how many bottles you fill, and I know that's coming, but based on our current.
You're, through the chair to Councilor, preventative maintenance is key, right? I would say on that filling station there, you're probably looking 15 to 20 years.
Okay.
Councilor Prestige?
Through the chair to Denisha, on our reserves, like last year we had, what, $21 million in reserves?
Right.
Did we take money out of those reserves to fund part of our infrastructure this year?
Yes, so the 2024 budget had, I believe, so the 2024 budget, if we are looking at it, let's see here. Transfer from capital reserve on the 2024 budget was $2.7 million. And funding from the current year capital was 3.9, so on this page here. So the 1.9 that I was just talking about here is included, a portion of that is included in that $2.7 million that came from last year.
Well, what I want to really stress is, for 5 years, we scrimped and saved to get our reserves built up, because we were told, I believe, by the province and other accountants and everything, we should have at least 1 year's reserve to
Right.
run our county.
Right.
And that's in the $20 million.
Right.
So I don't want to see what our staff, our administration, what we went through, our residents went through to get those reserves built up to where they need to be taken away just to fund some projects or buy some equipment. Those reserves, to me, are more important to maintain them than to complete some projects and that stuff. Because if that's how we got into this mess to begin with, was previous councils spent all the reserve money. And they didn't have any left, and then we didn't get tax revenue coming in, and it basically bankrupted us. So we gotta keep those reserves up to where they should be.
Just to follow up to what Councillor Presser said, and I'll go to Councillor Wilhelm. I believe that 2.7, a lot of that was around the greater purchases that we did this year, came out of our equipment reserve. Now, part of our policy on that with the other graders that were being replaced should be sold, and that money's supposed to go back into the equipment reserve. Where are we in that process? As far as selling the old equipment and putting that funds back?
Through the chair, we have not surplus any graders, but we have, we're in the process of surplusing a number of equipments. When we receive proceeds from those are going back to the vehicle, the equipment reserve.
Councillor Wilhelm?
Through the chair, just I guess comment on Bruce's comments. I totally agree, Bruce. Like, our reserves are very important, but I think we got to keep the mindset. Like, I think we need to be balanced about how we do it, right? Because if our house is falling apart around us and we've got money in the bank, what does that matter, right? Who cares if you've got $30,000 of money sitting in your bank if your house is falling to pieces? So we need to find that balance. I totally agree with you. Our reserves are very important, and we need to come up with a reserve strategy, but we can't just sock money away and not use it for what's really important. If we continue to deteriorate those assets, we've seen that deterioration curve, and if they get much worse, in the future, we're going to have to spend that money anyways to recover that cost. So we can't just sit on that money and not use it when it does really need to be used in some areas.
Councillor Dean?
Yeah, through the chair to administration, just a concept question. There's a difference between unreserved cash reserve and equipment reserves.
Right.
So when you amortize a piece of equipment, you're supposed to be putting money aside into an equipment reserve account to
Right.
be used when that unit is to be replaced. And is that what you said happened for the grader purchase? So money that had been allocated for equipment reserve for graders or for whatever was used to fund the lease purchase of the graders?
Through this here to Councillor Dean, I'm not quite, I understand what you said, and that is correct what you said. I'm not too sure which question you're referring to when I had said something.
Yeah, I apologize.
Yeah.
I added in that extra information.
Yeah.
So basically, what I heard you say was part of the actual from
Yeah.
last year's budget that had equipment reserve that was used to fund the grader purchase.
Yeah, so through this here to Councillor Dean. So the grader purchases from last year, one of them were funded through, I think, approval through council, and I believe that was through cash. And two of them were funded through the budget process to use equipment reserve. Right now, you're correct in saying that generally when we're depreciating an equipment, we want to add some funds back into that reserve in order to have those equipment fund there for funding. Right now, the county is not funding the depreciation of the equipment as a one-for-one. Over the years, it's been setting aside reserve amounts, but not necessarily the depreciation cost. So at the end of last year, council had in its actual allocated reserve to specific item, council had, just, I feel pulling it up here. Council had, I believe it was about 17 million that was specifically allocated and $8 million in, you could say, cash in the bank that wasn't allocated. So the 5.2 million roughly that we're saying that we will draw down is from that free cash. And so we'll also have some additional free cash that, let's say, unallocated cash in the bank this year from the savings that we have through operations because of different things, whether operating projects did not get done or employees came on late, so we have some savings. So whatever that net is, that cash is going to increase in addition to where we may have had we had increased additional reserves, and we had put reserves away in order to accommodate for non-collection. So where there is savings between those two, the cash amount, the unallocated cash will still be there. So I agree with Councillor Prestige in his comment that we have to maintain the reserve, but right now that 5.2 is not drawing down the allocated reserve that council has. It's drawing down the free cash. And I will have a updated schedule for the reserve to council in the next package so that you can see that.
Okay, thank you.
I just one quick question here, and I think probably for everybody's benefit, we have, when we're looking at this budget and all the proposed asks and whatever on here, it says, you know, our taxes are roughly 1.5% higher than last year, the budget 5% over 2020. What is the tax rate increase to the resident that we're looking at on this? What is the proposed, with all the asks that we have on the budget line here? What we're talking, and I know we haven't got to the operational side and that end here yet, but with what is being proposed, what is the proposed tax increase, the overall tax increase? Is it, because just on that one slide, we have a bunch of numbers. We're talking, the one number here is 1.48% higher in municipal tax revenue. Budget is 4.9% over 2024 actuals. And we also have expenditure increases, which is 8.4% roughly higher compared to 2020. So I'm curious, when we're looking at all these numbers, what are we talking about as far as a tax rate increase or proposed tax rate increase off of this presentation to the residents?
To the chair. So the numbers that we're calculating here was calculated on the adjusted assessment values after removing the assessments that we had to reduce because of the provincial decision on the recent case that assessment amounts were decreased in order to refund some taxes. So just to give that background there. So just using the reduction in assessment, there was an overall 6% increase to bring back the revenue, the tax revenue in line with 2024. So if we're looking at the 2024 actuals, we can see the 2024 actuals went down based on where the 2024 budget was, and that was because we had to do that adjustment for the court decision. So the increase essentially brings us back at that level. Now, as I shared before, we don't have the assessment information yet from the province, and our councillor Wilhelm just shared with me that we have a pipeline company that was given a tax holiday that should be ending this year that I wasn't aware of at the time when I was preparing the budget. So we will go back to the province to confirm that that's the case, and so that will change, that will adjust things also.
Okay, just to your point on the reassessed value on our corporate customer, we anticipated that, and that's why we actually had a line item in last year's budget to
Right.
offset that.
Yeah.
So saying, 6% to come up to be able to take that out, in reality, we already had that kind of covered, so I don't, a 6% to be able to meet the budget, but that money was already assumed that it wasn't gonna be available anyways. So
Right.
again, I'm coming down, what, for the asks that are on
Yeah.
this, what is, number one, what is the proposed tax increase? Like, are we talking 8%, 9%,
No.
6%?
Overall,
What is,
six.
overall?
Yeah.
6%?
Yeah.
And my next question, and this is kind of gonna be a little bit of frustration, because usually when we come to the budget time, by this point, we've got some idea from the assessment group as to what the assessment for the area is gonna look like, if they've seen something in growth or not growth. So I'm just wondering, and I asked this question at our council meeting last Wednesday, but at that point, it sounded like we had just started that process. So I'm just wondering, it sounds like we're a little bit behind on some of this. I could be wrong, but usually when we come to this, we have numbers on what the proposed assessment should look like when we come into here, so.
And through this year, so we did reach out to our assessor, and he shared with us, so I'm not too sure if there's something is happening differently with the firm this year, but he shared with us that he wouldn't have information for 2025 available. So Rod can speak more on that because he spoke directly with them. However, we have used, so as the year progresses, the assessor will send us any changes as it pertains to do with individuals who might file different sort of claims and when it is processed. So the last, might not be the last one, but the most recent one that was closest to the budget, we used that information to create this budget. So it was as updated up until, could have been September or October, where the assessor had sent us the changes that he had up to that time based on the assessment that he did last year. But for 2025 assessment information, he hasn't provided us any information on that we can use concretely. So we have just assessed the information based on the last, what is called 305 change and updates that he had sent. So we have been updating our records based on the information that he provides throughout the year.
Rod, I see your hand up, now over to Councilor Bros.
Sure. Thank you. Through the chair to council. In speaking with the assessor, I asked him 3 questions. One is, what is the market change on the residential side? Unfortunately, he does not have that done yet. He has been working on the land part of it, and he said it's really not up or down. That was all he could tell me. On the improvement side, he had nothing yet. On the depreciation for dip and industrial, he has not done anything yet. And again, with relation to new growth, which is the one that really drives what we can do, that is not completed until the new year, which is normal. That one you wouldn't have had probably. So in order to get the 31 million, as Tanisha said, we have increased the tax rates across the board by 6%. That gives us the extra money needed to get that 31 million. Now that in the end doesn't mean you have to do that. You could increase one 20% and one 10%, but overall, right now it's a 6% increase in the tax rates, which gives you 4.9% increase in tax revenue based on 2024 assessments.
Councilor Bros.
I'm just gonna come back to reserves for a minute. So, and we had struck a subcommittee on this, and then we haven't been able to finish the work with the CAO changeover and some of the things that's been going on, but I've been asking this question for a while now, so what specifically are the reserves that we have? What level are they supposed to be funded to, and what level are they at? I know at the moment we have, for lack of a better term, we basically got a bunch of cash sitting in the bank. We have some reserves on paper, but we don't really know how those are funded or even what they're supposed to be funded to. Like, part of my problem when I'm looking at this is we're not just making a 2025 budget, we're making a all the way out to 2030 budget. So if we're looking at pulling from reserves, contributing to reserves, I need to know where they are, I need to know where they should be, and I need to know where they're going to be at the end of this budget. And that's the piece that I don't think we have. So currently, can you name the reserves that we actually have? I know we've got an equipment reserve,
Yeah.
and the equipment reserve should be at what number to fund replacement of all of our equipment over the years?
Okay, through the chair to Councilor Burrows, yes, I can name the reserve that council currently has as of, let's say, end of last year. As far to, before I do that, also to address some of the other things you say, where they should be at, that is a bit right now a work in progress. Because it has to do with where the county really wants to go in certain of its investments. So we have our infrastructure team over the past few months have been coming to council and presenting where infrastructure is and the budget that is needed for infrastructure over X number of years. So when council makes that decision as how much it wants in order to get these infrastructure projects done, then that determines the how much it should be. So the how much is not necessarily just for a year, it's looking into the future. I'm saying that we have this infrastructure deficit, we need to have our reserve at X number of dollars for by the next 5 years to support this infrastructure. And also to some degree, looking beyond that. The next 20 year, we want to be able to do these and these and these in our county. So we should be projecting how we will be funding that 20 years into the future or 10 years into the future, what council decided on a strategic plan. So as far as the where it ought to be is not a question that I can answer today because it's a larger county question on strategic planning.
Can I just, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but let me put a finer point on it. So
Yeah.
let's go to something like equipment reserves.
Yeah,
We currently have X number of pieces of equipment.
right.
We know that they have lifespans of X.
Yeah.
We know that we're gonna replace them, so what should the equipment reserves be at? You don't necessarily need a strategic plan. I know
Right.
the infrastructure part is, you wanna do this bridge in this year,
Yeah.
so you've got some variables there, but the equipment, you've got some timelines on when it should be replaced, how many miles it does, and so what would the overall equipment reserve be, and what annually should we be contributing to that specific reserve? And where is it at right now?
Yeah.
Through the chair to Councilor Burrows, we have some information. It will probably take us another month to give you, to answer the questions that you're trying to see. This is the reason why there are two categories of assets that Rod asked me to present to council similar to other categories. One is fleet, the other is water, wastewater. Those two were just not there to be ready to answer your question. I will tell you that there's currently as of December 31st, 2023, there are $4.9 million in reserve for equipment. We have, we will be drawing down 1.2 this year for 2 grader purchases out of the reserve. And then there's a transfer into reserve, which I don't know the number. So
Paul, I think you're looking for clarified.
I just want to make some comments in terms of where we're at and where we need to go. In the ideal situation, we would have the equipment reserve set up so that you're tracking hours, you're tracking kilometers, or whatever's the most appropriate for that piece of equipment. And annually, there should be a charge back that is putting what you need every year when a piece of equipment needs replacing, that the cash is in the bank. We are not there. There's been an allocation toward the equipment reserve, and Jeff has just made some comments about that. But there's not a good correlation between the life expectancy of pickups, the life expectancy of our heavy equipment, the big pieces, the yellow iron, I like to call it, and of course the smaller ones and the mowers. So we'll do what we can But right now, corporately, we don't have good records in terms of the rate that we're wearing this equipment out. We also, you have made an allocation to the equipment replacement reserve, but that's not been fine-tuned relative to, is it enough, is it not, et cetera. So there's more work to be done on the equipment reserve. We'll see what we can do to give you the best information we can, but it will be not as fully developed as ideally you need to go over this next year or so. The other issue with this question of reserves and infrastructure, the comments here are very valid, that there was a lot of hard work done to put some money in the bank and reserves, and frankly, the county was living off its credit card. And we know how that works. You pay the minimum balance and you're in trouble. So steps were taken to get some cash back in the bank. Now, where this budget has got to look different, though, is we've been doing a lot of work, and you've seen 5-year plans on a lot of the different infrastructure asset categories. And you'll recall that we've got many of those pieces of asset are in the critical stage, which means they're already in bad shape and getting worse. And the most expensive work that you can do is let things fall in that category, so you are doing emergency repair work, where we've got a problem with a bridge, we have to shut the road down, and it's not too bad, where there's been some very good work over this past year where our forces have undertaken some of those work. But when you have to go to contractors and say you need immediate work, guess what they're doing to their pricing? Because they have to leave other jobs and mobilize, you are paying a premium. So the comments about money in the bank and the house falling apart, we've got some of that, where some of our infrastructure has hit the critical stages. So the challenge in this budget, and very, very difficult, is rebalancing that. So we are spending some more to deal with our infrastructure that is in the most critical need and have the most impact on our residents, our ratepayers, and people using roads, et cetera. So those are the tough conversations we have to have with you through this budget, because the balance in the past, with the focus being putting money on the bank, is we've accumulated infrastructure deficit. So now we have to work with you to find that balance between not depleting what's in the bank, but making some additional investments in our infrastructure so that we can move some of those infrastructure pieces off that critical and in need of immediate repair, because those are extremely concerning. And you know from the list, we've got quite a group of our different pieces of infrastructure that fall in that category. So the points you're making are all very valid. We will try to give you the best information we can, but I absolutely telling you that we don't have all the backup and all the records we should ideally have to fine tune all of that. So we'll do the best we can to say this is what it looks like to us, and we'll have to use that information to make the best decisions that we can. So we'll be trying to work with you and try to answer your questions to the best of our ability. There are many cases where corporately you don't have the information, it has not been tracked. So we've been working very hard to give you the better sense of what things are looking like in terms of the condition of our infrastructure and where we need to go. But that's going to lead to the difficult discussions we have to have during this budget to find that different balance, because the balance has got to look different moving forward than it has in the past few years. And we know why, where you're trying to put money in banks so you can pay bills. That has helped in that regard, but it's created some other challenges for us. So we'll do the best we can, and please don't feel we're trying to be evasive. There's some cases where corporately you don't have the information. I wish I could tell tracking how many hours your graders are running, and when you start doing shoulder pulls and other things, they're going to run more. So we've budgeted for the depreciation. We're not there. And it is good that you've made a contribution, but we can't find any record that would calibrate that contribution. Is it the right amount, not enough? Our gut feeling is it's not adequate, but until we go through and look at the life of it, everything you've talked about, that needs to be done, but we're not there yet. So we'll do the best we can, and we'll need some patience from council understanding what information we've got and what information we don't have.
Can I get to Rod? I think wants to add something, and then back to John and over Bruce.
Okay, thanks to through the chair to council, and just kind of on John's point and even Bruce's is when we did the analysis in Wetaskiwin, we had a minimum of $10 million in our equipment reserve. And for the total reserves, if you look at, we need 1 year's worth of operations, our reserves should be sitting at 31 million, and right now they're at 17. So the question is, how are you going to get there? And the number is not great, but you're probably going to need a 6% increase in your tax revenues over the next 5 years if you want to get anywhere near those numbers where you're self-sustained and start working on getting to the point where you're spending your 750,000 on bridges or culverts a year and those types of things to keep your infrastructure going. So we're a long ways away, but there is light at the end of the tunnel if council's willing to move a bit and spread it out over that 5 years.
Councilor Rose?
So, and I guess I'm gonna come back to Councilor Wilhelm's analogy on the, if your house is falling apart. And I guess what council's looking for is, we agree that the house is falling apart and we need to spend some money on it, but we wanna make sure that we are spending money on the new roof to stop the damage that's occurring, rather than putting new siding on it that looks pretty. And that's where I'm having trouble with figuring this out. Like, even when you go through pickups, and I know some of the, like, how many people are in a pickup? Because I never see the back seat in a crew cab full of people. I just never see it. But we're running around in crew cabs with 5-foot boxes and a trailer, where we could have a regular cab with an 8-foot box actually burning a lot less fuel per truck. So you're asking us to spend money on equipment that may not meet a fleet requirement, but we're gonna have them for the next 5-10 years. And I've had to make this decision every year for the last 8 years, asking for the same information. If we're saving 3 liters per 100 kilometers on a piece of equipment that doesn't need to burn that fuel, that's a pile of money in operating when you put it across a fleet. So are they having to pull a trailer because the box is too small? And I'm not looking to get too granular. I just want to know, and again, fire stations, have they got a truck that's 10 years old with 100,000 kilometers on it? We'll slide it over into the summer, the summer student area where they're hauling nothing but lawnmowers and, they're light loads. And if it is in the summer student area, like the, what do you call it, rec, they need all box and no cab. You're only dragging 2 people around. An 8-foot box looks weird on a truck now. It used to be the only thing you could get. But now everything's towing a trailer, and you can't fit a shovel in the box now. They're 5.5 feet long. It's ridiculous. And it's a $120,000 truck. So I'm just trying to get an idea on the big picture on the fleet side, and surely on the pickups, we can figure something like that out, what the fleet needs to look like. We've got a couple of trailers that trucks that need to pull a gooseneck or skid steers or mini excavators or something around. But if it's only hauling it 2 or 3 times a year, or 10 times a year, maybe we contract it and we end up saving money on the piece of equipment. I don't know, but I'm just not seeing that across the thing. And I've asked the same question every year for the last 8 years, and I'm sorry you guys are getting the brunt of this. I know everybody's new, and this isn't a fire emergency services question. I'm kind of going off on a bit of but I can't see the big picture, and I don't think council can either, because you're asking us to make some really big money decisions, and we're looking through a peephole is the problem. I need to see through the whole windshield. So I'm just airing my thoughts on it more than anything, but I need more information. So
Councilor Prest, if you want to get your, and then Mr. Bennett, it looks like he's got some comments.
Through the chair to administration. I'm gonna go back to the reserve. The reason we're in this situation was, I think it goes back to the graph I remember was 2008, 2009, where our expenses went up. Our revenue came down. And they were using our reserves to fund the expenses, but they were not replenishing the reserve. till it got to the point where we had no reserves. And where it came up was in the equipment reserve. We were gonna buy a new grader, and the infrastructure director was told we had $6 million in equipment reserves, and we had this, because it was paper. That's when we found out we were broke. So, if we're gonna use reserves to fund some projects, we better have a way to replenish those reserves. That's in the next budget. Otherwise, if we keep robbing from our reserves, in 5 years, we're not gonna have no reserves left. So we have to keep those reserves up. And if I remember right, when we were told we needed 1 year, and that's a minimum, they're saying 2 years, and that was the province that told us this. So, like Rod said, we got a long road ahead to get our reserves up to where they should be. So, we can't just keep robbing them to do infrastructure projects. So we have to be very careful how we do our projects and still look after our reserves.
Mr. Benedetto?
Well, we will undertake to take another look at the pickup question. I mean, typically, I mean, I'd have to find out here, but typically some of the fire pickups, you know, they don't get the same use as some of our other ones that are on the road every day. So that does create some opportunity to shift them around. They don't necessarily have to be new, et cetera, and you're not up against the firefighter's rating in the 20 years, the same as you are in pumpers and other pieces of equipment. So we'll undertake to take another look at the pickup question. The comments have been made about reserves are all important, all valid. The challenge through this budget's going to be finding that balance between addressing those critical infrastructure pieces and not undermining the good work that's been done to start to recover the reserves. So obviously, this is a challenging budget, as we all know. So we'll do our best to, there'll be some times where we can tell you we've got information, there'll be other times where we'll tell you that we don't have it, but we will be as candid as we can with you with what we can provide to help you.
Councillor Dean?
Through the chair to administration and to council, I think from a macro level, you know, if the ask is 6% across the board, I don't think there's will within council to find the funds for, to fund those projects at a 6% tax increase. I know we had some informal discussions talking about cost of living increases, and I don't want to speak for council, but I'll speak for myself. I think 6% is too much. So we need to find some areas to trim.
Oh, and actually to that, like, I'm going to start with Sheldon. Like, the stuff that you have listed here is obviously stuff that needs to get done. I'm not going to dispute. I mean, the fire truck is obviously an essential piece. We have to try to find some way to do that. If it's not available for fire services, yeah, that causes a big issue for residents. And I agree with you. If you have undersized equipment, especially trying to move trailers and stuff, that is a problem. We have to figure that out. So I just want you to understand, like, when we're talking about the trucks and stuff, this isn't on you. Like, we are completely understanding with what your requests and what you need, especially around the septic field and the SCBA's. Now, I want to kind of echo what Councillor Dean was saying. We're talking about increases and stuff on here. I know this is part of the operational asks, but it also plays into the capital end here. We have a request for $1.1 million in additional staffing. And council's direction when we had this was, yes, we agree that we need to be having some of these positions and need to come up, but we can't afford all that in 1 year. Now, having $1.1 million in staffing requests put on here, then on the capital end, we also have the one line there for 2 additional pickups for new staffing positions. So my question, I guess, kind of comes to this is, how much other items in the equipment list do we have on here on the capital side that directly relate to this $1.1 million in staffing positions? that council hasn't approved yet. Jeff?
To the chair, if you go to page 10 of your PowerPoint, you see a enlarged version of the fleet priority list. And I will point out to item 18 is the additional tractor mower, which it's related to the additional positions of trying to in-house the mowing contract. We need to supply the staff with tractors and mowers so they can do the job. So that's one, to your point. And that item number 19, the additional pickup for additional positions. And that's for 2 pickups for those 2 positions.
And just to that, and I'm not saying that they're not needed positions, I'm not saying that, but currently in the budget line for number 18 and 19, for the additional tractor and mower, 2 additional pickups, and then the 1.1 mil, we're almost $2 million in increases on the budget for just staffing increases and tractor mower and 2 extra pickups. Just, if you're looking at this, we're asking to make a large decision that impacts our residents at 6%. I understand we have service levels and stuff that we have to fill, but we've also, before when we were talking about these extra positions, we needed to see which ones needed to be filled first, and we weren't prepared at that point. We were talking budget-wise what it looked like before we approved any of those extras. So I'm just, again, between $1.1 million in additional budgets and then almost another, was it 700-800, we're just about $2 million on additional with just that end or staffing and number 18 and I just, so council's aware, it's a lot of extra money. Councillor Wilhelm.
Through the chair of administration, so sorry, Sheldon, you're stuck on the hot seat here while we answer all these
Well, most of
broad
them
questions. Just scrolling down, so I'm trying to get a broad picture here because we're trying to make capital decisions that will have an impact on a much broader picture here. And I think that's where sometimes, some of us are trying to be like, okay, well, how do we talk to Sheldon about these specific asks he's having, not knowing, maybe not understanding the broader picture enough with what's happening with the entire budget? So just I'm gonna ask some clarifying questions so I understand properly. The total ask here from the 5-year capital plan, you guys, we're looking at, it's almost $19 million, although 5.7 is carryover from 2024, correct? So we had kind of already allocated money for that.
Yeah.
And then an additional 13.9. Is that covered in, so when you look at the revenue, let's look at page number 12 in our package, which is past the capital part, but it takes in the operating budget in as well. Are your guys', say we approved every ask that you guys have on the capital end.
Yeah.
Is that included in what you guys have for your proposed 2025 budget at 35.8 million?
Yes.
Okay, so that's everything in there. So this 35.8 million is actually only a tax revenue increase of 1.5%. So that you're asking for
Right.
1.5% revenue increase
Yeah.
to cover all these capital projects. And to achieve that 1.5% revenue increase, we have to do a property tax rate increase of 6%.
Right.
So I'm just clarifying questions so I can
Yeah,
make sure to
through
wrap
the
my head
chair.
around the
Yeah.
entire thing.
So yes, the total revenue with the use of the cash to balance it out. The five. Yeah.
So it would actually, if we're using the cash on the cash side, our budget is higher than 35.8, or it's
Not the revenue, so not the, because we have, so on looking at using this page here.
which page is that, sorry?
It's one of the last pages.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was go to, it's
Okay.
just an attachment, it's one of the last pages there. So on the operating side budget, we have highlighted all the total revenues that we're getting. And then expenses number 2 is highlighting the operating expenses that will come from that. So the operating expenses in total is the 31.8. That 31.8 includes That's where we get the difference between last year's and this year's budget of the 2.4 million, which most of that 2.4, as slide number 2 shared, is the additional the new initiatives, so the new salary amounts and all the operating costs that goes to that accounts for majority of that. Then from there, when all the operating expenses is taken out, we have, you could say, a surplus of 3.9 million on this sheet.
Okay.
Then we covered out of that surplus 2 small amounts that are for asset retirement obligation and for allowance for doubtful accounts. And that brings us down to about $3 million remaining. So that $3 million that's remained from the revenue is contributed over to the capital side of it and balance it out with what is coming from the reserve from previous approved budget. The grants that we are expecting to get in is also there, and the debenture. And then the rest of the funding is what comes out of cash. So that's how that sort of flows from the operating side to the other side. So we haven't used the transfers to increase the revenue line or the expense line, because the transfer is happening after those are revenue and expenses, and whatever is remaining is what we do for transfers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then just to continue the process
Yeah.
on how we're gonna make some decisions today and in future budget discussions. So knowing that this, the total that you have here for infrastructure, plus what we'll discuss on our operating side, for every item that we potentially look to maybe shift a year or 2 years and drop this number down is going to have a corresponding tax rate decrease occurring in the budget, correct?
Right, so there will be some, so it all depends on the degree to what council change. So say, for example, council were to cancel $3 million in projects. So it will depend on whether or not the projects that we're removing, council wishes to not use cash at all. So cash will remain, the 3 million will remain, and then if we're removing that 3 million, then of course the revenue side of it will change accordingly, because we would need less, because right now we have roughly $3 million that are going from the operating surplus into the capital. So if council reduces $3 million and said we don't want to use cash and we want to reduce 3 million, then that's where the offset. So that's, it all depends on where we're playing with it. If the council says $10 million we're reducing, then clearly cash is gone and we still need to draw down another $7 million. So then that will change those dynamics. Yes.
So I guess I'll come back to council then. And it kind of piggybacks on Councillor Dean's comment that he had earlier. We need to help administration maybe shift or trim some of these items. What is a tax rate that council would find acceptable, right? Because say we say, okay, 6 is very a dramatic change for our residents. Maybe we can look at something like 3.5 or 4. We can then, I think administration could then use that value to then tier some of these capital projects out so that we can spread them out to other years and also give you guys a little bit more of a driving factor on how you're going to make your decisions. Because some of this, like I believe in these discussions, you're coming in with asks, but you guys are the experts on it. So we don't, when, you know, you did it with the fleet, which is great. Now we've got a priority list here. But some of these other projects, you know, you're asking for them and we might think they're not needed next year, but they really are. So that, I think that's when we come back in a future discussion, and we've said, okay, we're only comfortable with the 4% tax rate increase. You guys need to re-tier these projects to tell us which ones are, label them 1, 2, 3. Which ones are ones? They absolutely have to be done. 2s are a need, but not a have to have, and 3 are a want. I don't think there's a lot of wants in here. I think these are pretty critical, but knowing that we only have a comfortable level of tax rate increase for this year, you're gonna have to pare some of these things down, and you're gonna have to help us with that, right? Because, again, I could just say, wow, I don't like this one project on line item 3, but you guys really, really think we need it. So that's where your guys' expertise need to come back to council and tier the projects a little bit better for us. So let's roll back to my initial conversation. What is a tax rate increase that we can give administration that we think is much more comfortable, that they could come back with a revised budget so that we can make additional decisions moving forward? Because I think a lot of what we've had today for conversation has been this kind of the same conversations we've had for the last 3 years. And we need to give them a little bit better marching orders, I think, for the next meetings coming up.
Now, to that question for administration, what are we seeing as a cost of living increase?
Well, I see Mr. Eve Rod's got his hand up. He might be addressing some of this first, and then we'll fill in.
So I think one of the comments I have to make is that 3.1% is cost of living. Unfortunately, the reality is if council does a 3% increase, you're going backwards again. There is no way for you to get to a point where you're moving forward using a 3% increase. Again, the idea today and the next day was for council to ask all these great questions, for them to see the whole picture on both capital and operating, and then for council to do the priorities based on the level of service. And I guess if you want to talk about a tax increase, but we need to know what your priorities are as far as what you want to do with staffing, what you want to do with your levels of service. Our intention is not for you to say, this is what we want. Council had asked us to put the 10 positions in to give you an idea of what they cost and what it would be to get to a certain point. So what we've got here today is probably a minimum of where you need to get to have your current level of service taken care of, with some increased equipment. Now, if you reduce the equipment, like Denisha said, you reduce the amount of cash you use, which doesn't allow you to reduce the 6% in taxes. So as I mentioned in my email, we're not looking for any real decisions today because you haven't seen the entire picture yet. And I don't know how you can, the priorities need to come from council. And we can certainly prioritize, like Jeff has done with the fleet list. And we can certainly do that on the project side as well. But in the end, it's council's budget and it's council's decision to make, and that's where we have to live with at the end. So I don't know that we need to go as far as what percent increase yet. I mean, you can give it, but at the end, you might say, well, that was wrong because we haven't heard everything yet.
And one other piece of information, like administration that you bring back, is at a 6% increase, what is the average rate increase for the resident? We've been able to see that in the past to kind of bring on a chart. We would see what the say what your average property value and the average tax rate would be, or tax increase would be. So it gives us kind of a better understanding on what that would look like. And I guess moving on with Sheldon with Protective Services up here, is there anything else for Sheldon in his department, or should we move on to the next? Okay, not seeing anything else for Sheldon. If Councilor Dean, I see your hand going out there. It's just.
Yeah, through the chair to council and administration, I just want to be careful that we're talking about a revenue increase and not necessarily a mill rate increase. So there's obviously other factors that affect that, and one is, as Councilor Wilhelm had pointed out to Ms. Ferguson, potentially there's more revenue coming in. So that percentage increase is based on revenue, right? Not mill rate.
No, it's mill rate. It's a 6% mill rate change.
Right, but we've been focused on looking at revenue as our driver, and so we have potential for more revenue coming in, which might affect that mill rate.
So I guess nothing else for Sheldon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I just want to follow up on something you mentioned, and you're right, there might be more revenue coming. The thing is, if you look at the way and I'll just go ahead and say municipalities, because I looked across many municipalities, we were seeing that 25-year trajectory of increasing assessment, and there was a percentage of market assessment increase in there, but a large assessment increase was due to growth. And where we have to be careful when we're budgeting is on the growth side, that may be a new subdivision coming online with more roads to maintain, so there's an increased cost that goes with it versus, a pipeline where there is no cost associated with it. And we may be able to use some to soften the blow across, but I think your points to, looking at the actual revenue is really, really relevant.
Jeremy?
This isn't to Councillor Burrow's comment, it's just for the general meeting. So with regards to, it's kind of piggybacks off of what Rod was talking about, and making sure that we're getting a lot of value out of what we're doing in the meeting today. So Rod, just for your comments, and for Paul and staff, Sheldon presented something and then it carried over into something else. But with regards to what we want to achieve in today's meeting, is today mostly, like Rod had said, we don't want any hard decisions come out of here. That's great. Is today mostly just a presentation of asks, and then we will look at future meetings for cutting things, or are you looking for more of a direction coming out of this meeting as we move forward? Like if we're utilizing this meeting today as here's a broad overview, these are going to be our asks, these are why our asks are there, and maybe we can limit some of our harder questions for future meetings when we have a little bit more information. I'm just wondering if that's what administration's looking for today.
Through the Chair Council, you're exactly right, that you need to look at all of the information, you need to ask all of these questions, because these questions in the end are going to help where the priority is going to be for council. And so we don't want to go through and just present it to you and not hear anything. We certainly need to hear all these questions and all these concerns so that we can assist and be part of your team in addressing the priorities in the end. So probably after the second, I don't know how far we'd get through on the operating, but if we're able to get through the operating in one more day, then the third day is going to be sitting down around a circle and saying, where are we going? What are the priorities? What increases do we need?
Thank you.
Bruce?
Through the chair to Denisha, we're showing a 35 million revenue per the budget. Where does our school tax and old age come out of?
So it's on the expense line, to the chair, to Councillor. It's built into the expenses of $31.9 million. So depending on which sheet the only place that it's shown on this last page here, where it has the line here for $6 million. Yeah. So it's part of the expenses. Yeah.
Okay, that was the first hour and a half. Do you want to take a break? We'll get back into this and then we'll bring up our next victim in the front desk. Thank you very much for sitting there, Sheldon. Okay, I'm gonna pass it over to Jeff. Jeff's gonna, I guess, touch on the projects, and then we'll use that as our starting base and go forward. Whenever you're ready, Jeff.
Good morning, your worship members, council. I heard from the conversation this morning. I know this plan may appear larger than previous ones. I want to acknowledge this plan is trying to present the needs to address the growing issue of deteriorating assets. We have not included all the asset management presentation projects in this plan. We already done some internal shifting, but it's important to lay that out for council so you can see for the entire picture. In developing the plan, the staff have reviewed both past and current needs based on asset management data, and many of the projects are somewhat familiar to you because you probably heard it from the various different asset management presentations. We have, as I mentioned, we have already taken some risk managed decisions to try to reduce the load, recognizing it is a large load. Of course, this is, as Rob said, this is the time where we're looking for any questions you may have, and perhaps come back in a later meeting to do some hard decisions. We, as Tanisha said, we have identified a number of projects that have potential for grant opportunities, and we will pursue them pretty aggressively, try to improve our revenue side and hopefully reduce the bottom line. The metaphor I was going to use is we're going to shoot whatever flies and claim whatever falls. So we're going to give a very hard try for that. I would like to first walk you through the structure of the capital plan. If you go to page 7 of your PowerPoint. The first column identifies the name of the project. The second column identifies the funding source, which may be carry forward the capital budget, committed grants, or potential grants. The third column shows the amount carry forward from the 2024 capital budget. Since we're still in 2024, I do want you to just keep in mind that we don't have actual expenditures because we're still in 2024, so some of those numbers may change when we have the actual expenditures. The next 5 columns show the planned year for each project. For projects requiring longer lead times, we have planned expenditures a few years ahead of its intended delivery year to allow adequate time for engineering, land acquisition, environmental permitting, and other necessary pre-construction activities. The estimates are based on 2024 costing. The final column represents the total investment for each project under the plan. For projects extending beyond 2029, the total reflects the forecast only within the 5 years. We're not including things outside of 2029 in the total. Next, I will just walk you through the roles. The plan is organized into several key asset categories. The first one being transportation related to the road network. The second is the airport. Third is the recreation. Fourth is buildings. Fifth is the environmental, including water, wastewater, solid waste. You already heard fire, and the last one is equipment. In the transportation category, excuse me, projects are generally grouped into subcategories, such as hot mix roads, subdivision roads, bridge files, co-mix roads, and as miscellaneous. And transportation and building projects, they were developed pretty much based on the asset management presentation that you have heard. And further evaluation was based on risk management, what staff felt comfortable in delivering, in delaying, in bundling of those projects. The environmental projects development process has been more reactive that's one out of two categories that we didn't have time or opportunity to bring asset management presentation to council. The equipment list has been developed using two distinctly different processes. For existing fleet replacement, we followed the process laid out in policies 3106, which was approved last year. Staff used the point rating system in that policy to assess the need for replacement. If the equipment meets the required points for replacement, staff will then review the equipment to see whether we need to replace in 2025 or maybe a later year. Or the equipment can last a few more years that we don't even put a number in. I get the chair's point of better utilizing the fleet between different departments. That's something we'll take a closer look after the meeting. The second process for developing the equipment list is to do with the addition. I have separated them into, if you see the title or the name of the project, some of the names as addition, some are named as replacement, just to give you the sense. The last page of the capital plan contains a prioritized equipment list to just help council understands better the priority in our mind when it comes to equipment. I can now walk you through each of the project if you don't have any questions on the overall.
Councillor Wilhelm?
I have a quick question with regards to your categorization of stuff. So, when we're looking at the idea of service levels with equipment or with projects or with our various divisions within the county, when we're looking at the capital plan, is the idea of things like additions, those would be, are the additions required to maintain the current service level that we have? In some of those places, the current service level is deficient? Or is an additional item, like say we're adding a asphalt sprayer, just to use one random thing, is that then the addition of that item actually increases the service level for that specific department or item? Like, I'm just trying to, when we're talking about service level and we're talking about budgeting, trying to wrap my head about how we can utilize both things and have a proper conversation around service levels with regards to the things that we're adding. So is an addition, again, to go back to my original question, is an addition increasing the service level or maintaining what we have now?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilhelm, we have to look at line specifically.
Right.
The additional equipment, for example, the additional pickup truck, that's to do with the two additional positions that's proposed. The addition of the mulcher, that's instead of hiring contractors to do mulching, if we buy a mulcher, we can do that in-house. It's not entirely, I don't want to say we're going to recover the money in a year, but over a period of time, you're recovering the cost of it. The mower, again, that's trying to recover currently contracted cost over a period of time. The asphalt sprayer, you mentioned that's necessary today when staff doing cold mix patching try to do tacking, they're using mops, and asphalt sprayer just try to do that task.
Sorry, you don't have to go through each line by
Right.
line. I'm talking about broad picture when we're having these discussions moving forward. Just so that I understand, or we understand that, what you guys have suggested here. This is to maintain a service level, or some of these actually increases the service level of the items?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilhelm, the addition of fleet are generally to maintain existing service level or a different way of doing business. For example, taking things in-house.
Okay.
Any other questions, Jeff? Please feel free.
Okay, so just going through the list one by one. On page 7, we start with the transportation projects. The first 3, the East Mountain Road paving, the West Mountain Road paving, and the West Mountain Road bus ball, those were carried forward from the 2024 budget. The next The next line, East Mountain Road slide. That's active slide that we've been monitoring since summer this year. It's been dormant for quite a few years, but start being active again. If we don't try to do something, then we risk losing the road, and there may not be a connection to for East Mountain. And that's the risk. That's why we're putting $2 million worth of consultant that's currently working on design. Next one is culvert replacement urgent. This is what we came to council for. As I mentioned in last week's council meeting, we are looking in ways to see if we can come up with innovative solutions to reduce this 750 number. The next line is culvert replacement for routine. Council heard my presentation on culverts. In terms of asset management, I did mention that some of the costs will go into operating, some of the costs will go to capital, and this is to reflect that comment. The next 5 lines are subdivision and the local road, local co-mix roads. And these 5 lines were developed based on the consultant report and also based on the presentation I made to council regarding co-mix. And we're trying to stagger them so that we don't overload ourselves both in budgeting and as well as in staffing. The hope is in a span of 5 years, we're addressing all the poor and critical subdivision and local co-mix road in the county. Behind each year's project, in the bracket, you see the roads that we intend to do in those years. The next 8 lines are for bridge file replacements, and those are based on asset management plan, and council would have already seen them in the presentation. I would point out the first 2 projects are carried forward from previous budgets, and the first 2 projects we're also receiving grant funding from different programs. Going forward, when we are ready to apply for grant funding, we're definitely going after to apply for grant funding for bridge structures. The next line is bridge rehabilitations. That's to reflect the money we spend in terms of rehabilitating bridge structures, not to the point of replacement, but sometimes we want to do superstructure replacement. We want to do superstructure strengthening to extend the life of bridges, which is a capital cost, which should be reflected here. And moving on, the Oak Ridge Highway rehabilitation, East Mountain Road rehabilitation, cut across the East Mountain, West Mountain cut across rehabilitation. Those 3 are future hot mix roads that we believe needs to be overlaid, and they are for 2020. They're scheduled for 2028 delivery. Based on the consultant report, consultant recommend them to be overlaid in 2026, but we felt we can delay them a bit further, so just not to overload the program. Moving on to Tower Road, Bison Road, and a few roads in the Fort area, and as well as Deerfoot Road. Those 4 roads are co-mix grid roads. And the program developed was also based on consultant McElhenney's report and part of my presentation to council on the co-mix roads. And they are for later years in the plan.
Sorry, I'll you for a second, Jeff. Councillor Dean.
Through the chair to Jeff, can you just clarify that cold mix, you say the Tower Road, I'm looking for a line number, but I can't find it. So the Tower Road rehab reconstruction of 20,000 and 20,000 and 25 and 26, and then almost 6 million in 2027. That's cold mix?
Through the chair to Councillor Dean, currently it's co-mix. It is a co-mix grid road, so I'm putting the word rehabilitation slash reconstruction because many of the co-mix roads that we have do not have adequate thickness for the support layer, so we I want to take the opportunity to do as much of strengthening as possible so the roads last longer.
And so would that go from the end of the pavement up and over the hill and connect to the pavement on the other side?
Through the chair to Councillor Dean, the limits of the project is from where the town and county boundary is and going south. I do believe just at the bottom of the big hill is where the pavement ends.
Okay,
That's the
where the coal
limit.
mix. Yeah, okay. It just seems like a big price tag for that section of Cold Mix Road, but thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Dean, these costs are based on the consultant report. I'd rather put something in that's enough rather than keep coming back to council to ask for
Sure.
increases.
Okay, thank you.
If I may,
Yes, sir.
the next one is Carlson Drive, stormwater line. Oh, sorry, next one is Crescent Drive storm line rehabilitation. This was identified through cammering. In 2024 budget, we have some operating budget to do camera inspection of our Hamlet sewer lines, and this was identified through that exercise. Next one is Township Road 584. I highlighted in red just so that we can have I can remind myself to have a conversation with council. Previously, this project was price tagged at $300,000. I think in May I mentioned to council I think it's very low in terms of cost estimate. At that time, I did not have a more accurate estimate. Through the summer, I've came up with a new cost estimate at $1.05 million. And recognizing there are at least 2 pipeline crossings that we need to cross, I pushed the project to 2028 delivery. The conversation I want to have with council is whether council still sees the benefit of project at $1.05 million price tag. I wasn't here when this project was first proposed. I didn't know
The proposal for first time it came up when we were taking a look at fire routes and escapes is 120 and 121. If you have a fire kind of early off of your East Mountain Road in that area, you don't have an exit route. So the idea around crossroad between them was for the ability for residents to be able to have an extra escape route if needed. The conversation round came up after we started seeing a lot of the fires in Yellowhead County and kind of north, and some of the issues that were, I guess, arised from some of those subdivisions. We were trying to get ahead of it.
Okay.
Now, whether future councils feel that way, we are coming into an election year here, and that'll be, I guess, on them, given that this is impacted in future budgets, but currently I don't feel that the council here would see that as an unnecessary act later on to ensure the safety of residents.
Okay, thank you. The next one is Carlson Drive. We, in 2024 budget, we have $100,000 approved for engineering, which we're proceeding. I did not add in the 300,000. That's carried forward from the previous plan. My thinking is just because it was already in the previous plan, just leave it in its previous place. The next line is Airport Road paving. This was carried forward from 2024 budget. The next one is Grove Creek slide. We repaired the slide. We partially repaired the slide, and I do believe there's still some outstanding work that's necessary at that location. I do want to undertake the remaining work at that slide in 2025. And the last 2 under transportation category are 2 engineerings for Old Ferry Road and Quebec Road, which I do plan to come back to council with update on both those roads on the December 4th council meeting. Are there any questions on the transportation side?
Councilor Prestige?
Through the chair to, what I would like to see is of this whole list is which is the top priority and number them down. Because, as Jeremy said, we don't know the state of these roads or these projects. So it'd be just a guess for us. So we need more information, which is the priority, which one can go 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So I don't know how hard that would be for your department, but it would sure help us making a decision.
Through the chair to Councilor Prestige, it's not that difficult if we're just looking at 2025. Because for future year project, we do have ability in future budgets to reevaluate their priority standing. It's not that difficult for me to do the 2025. The carry forward is carry forward from 2024 to kind of set in stone. But it's not that difficult for me to do a priority listing. The development of this program is, as Rob mentioned, we do want to give council the ability to see the whole picture, rather than just taking our priority or what we are planning to present to council, so that's the intent. If I,
Please.
so, going to the next page, page 8. Under airport, we only have one project listed there. It's the civil and electrical upgrade. And the largest portion of that is the runway paving. We have a grant application for STIP that's ready to go. The deadline is end of this week. So we'll be submitting a refurbished application from last year. We were not successful, but going to give it a try. Throughout the year, we were able to work with our consultant to reduce the total project cost from almost $7 million down to $5 million. So hopefully the province may see that as a positive step and look favorably in our application.
Councilor Dean?
Through the chair to Jeff, and what is the value of the grant application? Is it 5 million?
Through the chair to Councillor Dean, yes, the total project cost is $5 million. If it's approved under STIP, they typically pay fund 75%, which the province will give us 3.75, and we are on the hook for 1.25.
Okay.
Councilor Wilhelm?
Through the chair to Jeff, once the application is done, Jeff, can you share that with council so we can then work on our side with regards to getting certain people knowing about the STIP application, maybe a push on that side as well?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilhelm, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll move on to recreation. We only have one capital project for recreation, which is the spray park in Blue Ridge for the computer system upgrade. This year has already failed, so we're past the point of necessary. I'm move on to building, and these projects, majority of these projects are developed based on the consultant's report, which very recently council have heard the presentation. We have tried to group the projects together. We have also tried to push some of the projects out because the consultant's report has a heavy load on 2024, 2025, which we didn't want to overlook too much. So the first one under is the Whitehorse shop mezzanine floor construction. We're run out of room in the shop, so we do want to build more capacity in the shop. The next one I highlighted along with much later. I also highlighted one red. It's to do with the VAT building in the fort, and the reason I highlighted red is just to have a conversation with council. It's this building has not been used as intended for a few years. We intended to be a VAT office building, but currently it's just being used as storage. Given there's some significant expenditures coming over $100,000 in the next 5 years, I do want to have a conversation sometime. It's not an immediate decision because it's 2026 for the first expenditure. but it's something I don't have a good understanding of the future use of this building. So maybe it's one topic I'll have to bring back to the ASB for discussion. Just want to highlight that. Moving on, the third project under building is the dynamite magazine replacement, and that's for 2028. And following that, we have quite a few items for the office. So the fourth row, the fifth row, and the seventh row, they're all for the office, but for different components. One is for the building envelope, the other is for the climate control system, and the last one is for the electrical and exterior walkway upgrades. And the building envelope is the more pressing needs for us that we identified in 2025. Moving on to the yard, we do have a dual-use fuel tank in the yard that needs to be replaced, and that's for 2026. Moving on below for the Assiniboine office electrical and exterior upgrades, we have the sheds, interior and exterior upgrades, but those are for 2029. And the pesticide heated and unheated storage upgrades also slated for 2029. Moving on to the Fort Assiniboine Museum restoration. This is a building that county owns, but it's being managed by a community group. We heard through the summer that there's some necessary restoration work, and surely it was confirmed by our consultant's report, and that's why we put it in 2025 budget. Moving on past the red marked vet building, are 4 items for this building. For 2025, we have the RTUs and the rooftop units and generally ventilation system upgrade. We also have, for 2026, we have for the electrical system upgrade for this building. And next one is a carry forward from previous year. However, we have to increase, we're seeking an increase to the budget. Council would have seen, I believe, $75,000 for the downstairs development here in the building in 2024 budget. That dollar amount is not enough. We currently forecasting about $140,000 for the downstairs development. And the last one for building is the windows replacement for this building. That's for 2029. Again, there's many grant funding programs available for buildings. We will be making applications. We are working with Alberta Council, the consultant, to make application on building grants.
The question I have for you, Jeff, in regards to when you're talking about the building electrical upgrades, you got interior lighting, wiring, exhaust fans. Can you elaborate on what you mean by upgrading the light or the interior lighting or wiring?
So the consultant identified this building. The lighting, the electrical system needs to be upgraded because it doesn't meet code requirement. The current code requirement, and that's triggered by the RTU, the rooftop units. And at the same time, the consultant also identified the lighting system can be upgraded, and there are grants available for that. That's why we put forward this project.
Whatever you mean, like going to LED or something along those lines. I'm just kind of curious what the scope of the project were.
I have to bring that information to next meeting.
Councilor Wilhelm?
Through the chair to Jeff. So, just I guess a general question with regards to some of the projects. Let's look at the airport runway. On that one, successful the grant or not, will we actually be doing that project based on cash/reserves, or will we be debenturing that project and then spreading it out over?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilhelm, I can answer the first part of your question. The work is necessary. Currently we already the pavement needs overlay. I will leave to Denisha to answer the debenture question.
To the chair, to Councilwoman. So right now, it's part of, it's not included in the debenture amount, so we haven't gone out for the $1.25 million in debenture. So it's part of the combination of the 3 millions that we are moving from the operating surplus and the cash that we will use. So we haven't added any additional debentures outside of the $4.2 million that council had previously approved.
So if we were to look then, like, again, it's a pretty large ask for 2025 with regard to infrastructure. If we were to ask general idea, like, say, of the 19 million, if you guys could find a way to either spread out or move $5 million of it, would you potentially use debentures on that kind of stuff to spread the payments out so it's not such a large hit in 2025?
Through Chair to Councilwoman, yes, we could look at debenturing some of these projects. Yes, these larger, more critical infrastructure projects for sure. Yes. And
Thank you.
yes, and then that would reduce the ask.
Right. Thank you.
Councillor Prestige, now go ahead.
To the chair, to Denisha, speaking of debentures, it would be nice to know what our status is on our debentures, which is coming due. Kind of helps us decide whether we want to do debentures if we're kind of loaded up with them.
Okay.
Like, I know there's the shop and stuff.
Okay.
It'd be nice to know when they're due.
Through the chair to Councilor Prestige, yes, I can gather that information and share it on email. Yeah, I can.
Sure.
If that's
That'd be
okay.
great.
Yeah, I can share that information on email.
Go ahead, Paul.
Well, we will bring you an update. I can't be totally positive, but I don't think we had a lot of debenture room left because I remember looking at it when we were debenturing the east and west mountain roads. But we'll bring you it's a legislated limit, so it's not optional. And we certainly would not want to have to go to the minister asking for an increase. Now, the other side of that, of course, is then you've got the combined annual interest and principal payments involved. So we'll bring you an update and we can, on the schedule, we know which ones mature when we make the last payment, so we will bring that to you. But my recollection is we didn't have a lot of room left. But we'll get it for you, so we're not, we're all working off the same information.
Okay, thank you.
Next, I just had a question, kind of follow up on the airport here as well. The $5 million, if we are unsuccessful again in the STIP funding on the airport, what do we do at that point? Because the $5 million to be able to do that, we can't afford that on our own. Do we, well, you know, I guess before that project continues or anything, are we gonna have a conversation with council around how we do that or how we apply that or what we do with the airport, I guess?
To the chair, if we don't get the funding and debenture, it's not an option. We have to reevaluate our options. And yes, we will have to go back to council.
Nothing else if you want to continue?
Sure. The next section is environmental. This is the water, wastewater, and solid waste. The first one, we have water line connection replacements. We already have a emergency repair we have to conduct this fall on State Avenue. This line is for continuation of the work and other leaks that we already know of this year that we need to repair. The next one is the State Avenue manhole and Thompson Road sewer line rehabilitation. This was identified once again by our camera that we completed this year. That's the manhole under State Avenue. There's no bottom left. It's all rotted out. The next one is the Blue Ridge Lagoon enlargement. The lagoon is running out of capacity. We are not asking for a construction project in 2025. The construction is actually in 2029, but we do need a number of years of pre-tender activities to do design and secure permits and buy land. We don't have room there. The next one is a septic dumping station construction. We currently at our two lagoons, we don't have a dedicated location or ramp for vehicles to dump their sewage. It's a bit risky for trucks to come close to the edge of the lagoon. And this is what we're trying to build is a dumping station. The next one is Blue Ridge sewer line and air releases replacement. This was also identified in this year's Cammering. However, we believe we have a few more years we can before we have to replace them, and that will also give us time to do some proper engineering work in the first 2 years. The next one is the Fort Assiniboine Water Treatment Plant upgrade. It's to do with the backup generator and pump. The backup generator failed this year already, so we don't want to take any more chances and want to replace that in 2025. The last one is the airport water reservoir supervisory control and data acquisition system upgrade. And that's to upgrade this computer system so it can be monitored and controlled remotely. We're asking for 2025 for that. That's the environmental side. If I can catch. Moving on to the last page number 9 is the equipment. As I mentioned earlier, these are separated into two groups: the additions and the replacement. So if I go one by one, the addition for the 6-foot rough cut mower, that's for airport. We have a large mower, we have a small mower. We need something medium in size, so because we're also taking on additional area this year, and we felt a rough cut mower would be very beneficial. It's a smaller cost estimate at $10,000. The next one, handy hitch roller. We have rented one and tried this year. I've putting some photos in my presentation to council. We do believe it provides a better product, and over time we're able to reduce the frequency that we have to do grading. So we do believe there's a longer term cost saving for the county. That's why we're asking for the purchase of them. They cost somewhere between $35,000 to $40,000 to buy per unit. So we're putting 5. The next one is a vacuum truck. We currently do not have a vacuum truck that we can use for cleaning culverts or even delivering water. We don't have a water tank. This summer, when there was dry spells, it becomes really difficult in trying to maintain our roads here in Whitecourt. And we thought that buying a vacuum truck that can both do the siphoning as well as delivering water be helpful in killing 2 birds with 1 stone. That's why we're putting in the budget. The vacuum truck is, without the ability to deliver water, the vacuum truck is still necessary because we got lots of culvert work that we need to do, and that's necessary to clean our culverts.
Sorry, Jeff, on the vacuum truck, in, I guess, past practices, do we contract this out if we end up running across this, or is it something we haven't done before?
Steve, do you know in the past if we contract them out?
We have, yes.
And again, this is like almost a $250,000 ask, so I'm just curious what the contracted prices were versus the purchase of the truck. If we're contracting at $30,000 a year is what the requirement was, and that truck's $240,000, we're long ways off there.
So to the chair, I bring that information back. What I will look into is also the cost to rent a water truck, because this one machine can facilitate 2 functions. I can bring that back too.
Thank you.
The next one is addition of a CAT, a small dozer. This was part of my presentation on ditching, and we're not planning to buy a new machine. We do believe there are decent pre-owned units out there that we can get our hands on. but getting a small dozer is necessary to do our ditching program, especially in the winter. The next one is an asphalt sprayer. This is necessary for any of asphalt repairs, patching and pothole filling. This is necessary. Without packing, there's no adhesion between the new material and the old material. The next one is the tractor mower, which is related to the intent of bringing mowing in-house. That's tied with that. And again, we're not looking for purchasing new units, so we do believe there are reasonable secondhand units out there. The next one is to pick up for additional positions, which we will take a more closer look after the meeting to further validate the necessity and usage. The last one is a mulcher. Currently, we hire contractors for that. We do believe over a period of time that's cost saving for the county. The replacement of units, again, these are based on the point rating system, but we also been pushing, even though a piece of equipment may meet the rating, we already make some decisions in pushing them out, and council will see two of the units follow that exact what I'm describing here. The grader, as well as the airport truck and sweeper, we originally have them as 2025 asks, but we recognize the load, and we also recognize we can probably still use these two equipment for a longer period of time. We push them out to 2026. So in terms of replacement, we want to replace one A131, which is the Magnum, which was surplused, which is currently being surplused. I came to council to ask for surplus, but this is to replace the surplus unit. The next one is a ATV rough cut mower. This mower is necessary for maintaining our lagoons and any rough terrain areas that don't have roads. And it's a small price tag of $10,000.
I'll hold you here for a second, Jeff. Councilor Prestige?
Through the chair to Jeff, on the mulcher, is that an attachment for the skid steer?
So the chair to Councilor Prestige, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on, replace unit A414, which is currently a garbage truck in the fort, and this unit is 16 years old, and we typically these kind of machine that last 10 years, we're already way beyond its time, and this is what we asked for a replacement. The next one is a T106, is a tractor.
Sorry, Jeff. So on the replacement of the garbage, just age aside, what does the maintenance on that unit look like? Is it something that is still reliable and running, or is it something that it spends more time in the shop than on the roads?
To the chair, this garbage truck has, the rust on this unit is substantial. I don't have the maintenance records. Maintenance for us, it's still on pen and paper.
And that's, even that is better, and it's this old, we should be replacing it. So I was just looking for the reason as to why. It's Councilor Prestige?
Through the chair to Jeff, on the garbage truck, is it the body that's rusted out, like the garbage compactor? Because if that's still working good, we could just replace the truck and put that body on the new truck.
So the chair to Councilor Prestige, I will have to bring back that information. I will say though, the maintenance cost is a factor already in the point rating system. So I'll provide you that information. Okay. Moving on, a tractor T106. This tractor is being used for the street cleaning in the fort. even though it doesn't see a lot of hours, but this machine it's over 20 years old. And the, I was not able to get the information on maintenance needs. I'm not prepared to talk about the maintenance need, but that's one of the, as I said, the point rating is part of that system. Moving on to SM63, the mower with zero turn. This machine is it's being used a lot in the summer months, and it's already 11 years old and mild out. The next one is a pickup, which we'll come back further. But one A160 is over 202,000 kilometers for an 8-year-old pickup. The next two we already talked about to push them into 2026. The next one, A417, is a tandem truck. This unit is 2013. The kilometer on it is 320,000. It's about 100,000 kilometers more than its intended use. We are spending more money on the maintenance of this truck. That's why we recommend to replace it. Moving forward, there are 3 pickup truck, which will come back. And the last one is the fire engine, which Sheldon already talked about. Any questions?
Councillor,
Yeah, just a question on the additional tractor and more of those 2 units at $650,000. Is there a possibility you could give us a cost of what that contract is every year? And then potentially, what the cost of maintenance on this equipment would be? There's a standard, and the operational, so that we get a better understanding of how that fits into our overall program, because the level of service can be maintained through contracting. It's just a matter of, what's the long term?
Through the chair to Councillor Kukan, we actually finished that analysis. At existing level of service, if we spend about $200,000 every year for contracting. And at the current level of service, if we bring this in-house over a period of 10 years, we're able to generate about $65,000 saving for county every year. It's substantial.
is that including wages and benefits on top of that?
To the chair, yes, we have considered pay benefits, the purchase price for the vehicles, the mowers and the tractor, the amortization, repairs, everything we have included.
Councillor.
I have one question on that vac truck up at the top, and you said it carries a water tank. Is this a hydrovac unit?
Through the chair to Councillor Burrows, no.
Okay,
Just needs,
so it's like a common wash.
no, it's just a vacuum tank, and you need to be sucked with
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Oh,
Councillor Rose?
I have one other question. So we were talking about fleet management a little bit, and I know you've got another grader here that's a ways out, and also right-sizing the fleet and some of these other things. So are we gonna see a report? And I don't know where we're at with our 160 grader, if we received it or if it's being used or anything, but I just recently went through a huge cat tour at the plant in Peoria, Illinois. And they have got banners everywhere in that factory on their rebuild programs. And the reason that I'm concerned about this, I think our graders are 2013, is that right? They're pre-emission is the deal. So a pre-emission machine, maintenance-wise and operations-wise, is considerably less than a post-emission machine. You don't have to run DEF in them. Those crappy filters don't fill up all the time, you don't have all that maintenance associated with it. And those are joystick units, they're not the antler racks, right? So they're still easy to operate. And, you know, can we get an idea on rebuilds? Can we try a rebuild? Because if you, and was it you that was telling me that the waste management rebuilt one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and theirs is working okay?
Yeah, and the warranty on it, I forget the warranty, but it came with a decent warranty. It's like it was brand new unit, and the cost was just what half what a new one was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in a track loader.
Yeah.
So the chair to Councillor Burrows, rebuild is definitely a possibility, but you have to look at the machine specifically.
Right.
For graders, a new grader costs somewhere just under 700,000 mark. A rebuild would cost in the high 500s. So the amount of saving isn't as significant when it comes to, say, a dozer unit, which the cost to rebuild, it's say 40% of it to purchase a new machine. You have to look at the specific machine. The other thing to keep in mind for rebuild, or part of the decision making, is if we currently do not have extended warranty, we're not going to receive warranty back from the rebuild. Currently, our graders do not have extended warranty. That's why for new machines, we are asking for 7-year extended warranty.
Any other questions? Anything else, Jeff?
No, that's the end of my presentation.
So that's the end of the capital side. Mr. Benedetto?
Through Mr. Reven, the members of council, so the capital budget, what we can undertake to do is develop a criteria that would be assigned to 1, 2, and 3, because I think it's important that we share with council, this is the criteria that we've utilized to prioritize the capital, because that helps, that information helps make sure we're on the same song sheet here, because that gives you more meaning to how we selected the assigned level of priority. So does that work for you if we undertake to go through that exercise, because to help you with the question of understanding the prioritization of the capital here, because there is a lot of capital here, no doubt about it.
Councillor Will?
Yeah, and I think if, this is just my preliminary thoughts on it, and you know, I know it's gonna put administration, it's gonna be a tough goal, I think, but looking at the preliminary capital budget and the items that are on here, I think if I was to set a goal for you guys, if you could find a way to shift 3 to 4 million of this 14 million into 2026, I think that'd be a much more palatable ask for the budget for 2025. I know lots of this stuff is critical and you would really like it next year, but shifting that 3 to 4 million into 2026 moves that budget to, 7-8 million and takes this one down from 14 million to 10 million, right? If we can find a way to shift some of that, then that is going to have a carry down aspect to our tax rate increases and our revenue increases, right? Which I think for some of the councillors, they were worried about the amount of tax rate increase. So if I was to set a preliminary goal on what we'd be looking for moving forward in the budget, I would look at that on the capital side. Just in my opinion.
Denisha?
Yeah, through the chair to Councilor Wilhelm. So when you say $3 to $4 million shift, are you also including the statement that you had asked earlier about potential debentures? So is that included in the debenture?
Yes, so I get creative. If
Okay,
you can
okay,
debenture some of
so-
this stuff to move the costs further down the line, I don't wanna see like something for 25 years or something like that, but if you
Right.
can utilize debenturing to shift some of these costs away from that huge
Okay.
initial ask, that would be a creative way to fix that.
Okay, so,
Councillor Dean? Just give me that over.
Yeah, thank you through the chair to council, I guess. With respect to the airport, that cost of $5 million, we were told earlier today that a successful STIP application would have us spending 25%-ish of that cost. If that application is not successful, I don't see any way that we can do this in 2025. So that $5 million mark is kind of an outlier for me because it's not real. Like, we're not going to spend $5 million on that airport in 2025. At the most, we'd spend 25% of that. So is that, from a strategy point of view, can we take that number and change it?
Through the chair to Councilor Lee. Yes, so we can present it differently for the next round, but indeed, for the county's cost, it's the 25%. But this report is just showing the total of what the cost would be. So answering the question about if we don't get the STIP grant, how we might be funded, that could be one of the projects, if council wants, that we put forward as the venture, if the county wants to fund it 100% itself without any funding from the government. But this all depends.
Councilor Dean?
Yeah, and I guess it's my opinion that even with a debenture, I don't feel it's appropriate to ask our residents to pay for the entire cost of that, whether it's in 1 year or 20 years. It's a regional facility, and you know, we've talked about this numerous times, that, you know, the primary user of that airport for the runway as it's spec'd, the one that requires those specifications, is not helping us. And so I just don't see that we can continue to provide that service.
Do that, I think, pending the results of this year's STIP funding application, this council may have to have a formal discussion on the airport, on the CYZU, and what we're doing with it, and the longevity of it. It's a tough conversation. It's going to be an uncomfortable conversation, but we only have so many funds going around, and if we can't get the help from the province or the support that we need as a regional hub, especially for the air base, then we're going to have that conversation on what that looks like on the capital side. We have, without the carryovers, that's almost a third of the capital ask this year is on the airport.
And so again, you know, whether it's debentured or not, I don't feel that that's appropriate to ask our residents, and so I think that number is just a little bit misleading in the grand scheme of things.
Through the chair, without the airport, I think we're about 9 million or so in our ask. Yeah.
Councilor Rose?
I want to come back to one page here, and on my presentation, it's page 12, which is the revenue compared to 2024 budget. I just want to make sure we're all in the same mentality here. We've been trying to talk about revenue generation versus percent change in mill rates. So the overall budget that you've kind of given us, the 2024 budget that we had in total revenue is $34,583,000, right?
Right.
The proposed budget with all the asks that you've got in is $35,816,000, correct?
Correct.
And the difference from 1 year to the next in revenue generation is 1.5%, correct?
Right, in the revenue, in total revenue change.
Okay, which means
In the municipal tax revenue is 1.48, and in the overall net, it is the change, yes, sorry.
so that's
Yeah,
revenue.
yeah, that's the revenue
generation,
change,
1.5%.
yeah, that's the revenue change.
And I used to remember this, because we kind of figured this out, but 1% on the mill rate, and again, one has little to do with the other if you start losing assessment. So 1% on the mill rate generates how much in revenue based on our on let's say based on 2024 assessment?
Less than 250K.
250,000?
Less than, yeah.
Okay, so that's why you're seeing that 6%. So overall, this budget is a 1.5% increase in revenue.
Right,
So the 6% increase in mill rate looks huge because we're at
yeah,
3.2558,
correct.
right? So you're seeing a big jump in the mill rate. But if you were, okay, so let's say that the assessment of somebody's property, land and buildings is flat,
Right,
no change from 2024.
right,
And I'm only talking about the municipal side because I know that the requisitions coming from the province are roughly 40 some odd percent of their total bill. But they're gonna, so let's say that, and I'm just using round numbers, let's say it was $2,000 that they were assessed at.
right.
Or sorry, $2,000 that they were taxed at, had to pay in taxes. That $2,000 would be an increase of 1.5%?
No,
You're talking about revenue?
no, at least 60%.
No, that's mill rate.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's not.
Well, you're
I'm
right.
talking about the actual, okay, you
Yeah.
run the number, they
Right.
got the assessed property,
Right.
you apply the mill rate, at
Mm-hmm.
the bottom of that, there's a cash number, an actual, what they're gonna cut the check for.
Right.
That check is $2,000. If we're
Right.
on the revenue side, it's 2,000 times 1.5%. That's the increase.
We're looking at the overall net. If we're just looking at, so we're looking at the overall net revenue, which is the 1.5, but that overall 1.5 higher in revenue that we will be getting in the overall net.
So that's what I said is correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and the reason
No.
that I'm asking, that I'm trying to be very clear on this, because
Yeah.
I've always used, and I guess for lack of a better analogy, because I couldn't come up with a better one, the mill rate calculation that we use is kind of the price of West Texas crude. Nobody cares. They care what it costs to fill up their tank at the pump. So that's what I'm asking, is how much is it gonna cost our residents to fill up their tank at the pump?
I
So,
think what she's saying though is because, and from her comments earlier, because we had that commercial player that had the reassessment and we lost $1 million, is this takes into the account the $1 million in lost or decrease to, I guess, come up with that. So it's 1.5 is the budget from last year to this year.
Yeah.
But last year's budget, take that minus the $1 million in lost assessment, and we need that extra 4.5 to come up to, so 1.5 growth plus 4.5
Right.
to make up for the lost assessment in the budget. So it would be a 6% tax increase to residents.
That's correct.
We're gonna have to redefine the tax increase, because these numbers just don't quite cut it.
So just for clarification, because it is, the words are, now that we're talking it around, are a bit confusing. With an overall average property tax rate increase, so that's of 6%, so that's taking the mill rate, let's say it's 1%.
Yeah.
Right? Then you are increasing that 1%,
6%.
6%, right? So if it was 1.0, now it would be 1.06,
Right,
right?
right.
So you're actually, when you're saying property, which is average, because you're doing an average between the residential and the industrial mill rates, right? Yeah. So you're increasing the tax rate 6%, not the actual money that we're getting out
No.
of 6%.
Right.
Yeah, so we've moved from a 3.2558 to a 3.4512.
Right.
Yep. Mr. Hawkins, see your hands up there?
Yeah, it's want to be clear that it's a 6% increase in the tax rate that brings us about a 4.9% increase in tax revenue. I think you can take out the 1.5. That's based on budget, and we've of course lost the ANC, so budget really doesn't factor in now. It's a 6% increase in the mill rates, and again, you can move that around between res, non-res, farm, all you want, but the value is the 6%.
Sorry, what was the difference in the change with the
4.9. So when we look at actuals, so last year's actual was 30.1 mil, and the budgeted actual is 32.6 mil, so that difference is the 4.9.
Okay.
I don't know, my throat.
Any other questions, comments? Councilor Wilhelm?
I guess my comment would be to council, I kind of gave administration I wouldn't call arbitrary, but a number to look at for cutting on the capital budget for next round. Was everybody comfortable with that number? Was it too much or not enough?
I personally think we need to look at the operational side and have the discussion around that, and then see where they are and where we need to make cuts after, and kind of go from there. But I'd hate to arbitrarily make a decision to come back with without seeing the whole picture yet. That would just be my feeling. But Councilor Prestige?
Through the chair. If we take the airport out of that, there's probably still some room on some of the projects to cut back even some more. So the more we can cut back is the less we have to raise our taxes.
Councilor Dean?
And the other factor, and I don't know whether we're gonna get it, this information before January, is just what our assessment's gonna be, and confirmation from the province on that tax holiday.
Through the chair to Councilor Dean, yes. I will reach out to the province to confirm on the tax holiday if that's ceased or if they are continuing it. And as we were talking earlier, it's to generate approximately a good amount of revenue from that. So let's hope there's no more tax holiday and we can add that in. So with that added in, it may be that the increase in taxes would be less, or maybe there would be no, all depend on what the value of the assessment is.
So just to follow up on that, if we get the answer,
Yeah.
and let's say the answer is yes, that tax holiday is over, do we have an assessment number? Was that property assessed last year but not taxed?
Through the chair to Councilor, yes, I will reach out to our assessor to see if he had something. My guess would be that it was assessed, but not in the tax category. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Wilhelm?
And from my recollection of the last time they were in, they had a line item on there of a linear that was currently underneath the tax holiday.
Councilor Dean?
And again, to follow up on that, so that would have included things like new wells that were drilled within that holiday period as well.
I
Yeah,
just remember there being a line.
yeah, me too. I just can't remember if it was broken down into
Councilor Rose?
categories or not.
Yeah, and we just have to be mindful when we're taking that in, that we don't use all of that to offset anything, because we don't wanna, this is kinda how this got us in trouble in the first place with all those charts that I'd sent out, was looking at that constant growth and then figuring out how to, spend within that development without taking into account the inflation and the consumer price indexes and all the rest of it. So we'll probably end up in the middle of that somewhere if it comes in, but, yeah, so we can soften the blow a little bit if it does come in, but the reality is that the consumer price index is up 3%, and I'm just using 3%, but the cost of doing business is up 3%. The revenue needs to go up 3% on that side, so.
Okay, anything else from council? I guess not seeing any, will, Councilor Wilhelm?
A motion that council accepts the 2025 operating capital budget presentation as information.
Thank you, Councilor, and I guess we'll, look forward to seeing what comes back from all the discussions. And I just want to thank administration. I know some of the questions and comments might have been uncomfortable or hard, but thank you. We're just trying to make sure that what we do best represents and qualifies what we have, so that we're giving the best value to our residents. And I know you guys are gonna work hard on what we've given you, and you've worked hard on what you've presented so far, so thank you. Any comments on the motion? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried, and brings us number 3. Councilor Wilhelm?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. I think there's somebody else picking up on that, but, no discussion on the motion, call the question, all in favor? And we are adjourned at 12:20. Thank you.